Hi everybody, my name is Peter Laws and this is the Flicks the Church Forgot, where I explore the deeper and occasionally spiritual themes of horror. Now today, I'm going to be sharing with you a whole bunch of horror books that I've been reading over the summer and a bit earlier in the year too. Books that I've found really interesting and helpful, and maybe you will too. Before I dive into those, remember you can follow me on Twitter at Rev Peter Laws or Instagram at Rev Peter Laws, Facebook, Peter Laws, and all the usual types of places. So maybe I might catch up with you there, or read my column, my horror column in the Fortune Times magazine, or get my books from bookshops: Purged, Unleashed, and The Frighteners, which is about why people love monsters, ghosts, death, and gore, and defending the morbid streak. And it's coming out in America on the 25th of September, so look out in the shops for that. But enough about those mediocre books. Let's look at some proper good stuff by starting with this. These are heavy, some of these books, by the way, so excuse me if I gasp. This is the Complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. What more can you say? Edgar Allan Poe, his reputation precedes him, of course. He is the forerunner of so much sort of gothic, spooky, scary literature and horror. What's not as well known about Poe is that, as well as kind of pioneering many ideas in horror, in the sort of psychological horror genre, he is also one of the first crime fiction writers, and writes. And there's stories in here which read like a kind of modern police procedural, only obviously set in ye olde days. But no, he's a very influential writer still, and he's a great writer, of course. As you can see, it's a really well presented book. It's a beautiful book to have on the bookshelf, but of course reading it is even better. And there are some cracking stories in here, ones that I've really enjoyed. There's also some great poetry in here. Let me tell you a very quick story about this writer. I had the good fortune to have breakfast with Jeffrey Combs, the actor who plays the Reanimator in Herbert West, in Reanimator, and among other things. And anyway, I was sitting having breakfast with him. We were chatting. We were at a hotel because we were doing this HorrorCon at the same time. And as I was chatting to him we were on about Edgar Allan Poe, because he does a one-man show in America where he dresses up as Edgar Allan Poe. He looks really convincing, and he goes on stage and cites his poems and all that sort of thing. And anyway, I mentioned that, and I just happened to say over breakfast, my favorite Edgar Allan Poe poem is Annabel Lee. And he just looks at me and goes, and starts to recite it there at the table. And I'm sitting there about to eat my toast or whatever, my jam on toast, and he just recites it perfectly. My favorite Edgar Allan Poe poem. It's a beautiful poem. And he's just there. He is like Herbert West sitting there saying this to me, and I just thought it was fantastic, and just loved hearing somebody present it, particularly in an American accent. Edgar Allan Poe was American, and you can find lots of different audiobooks of Edgar Allan Poe stuff, and it's like English people reading it. It's always great to hear an American voice reading it. But yeah, this poem, Annabel Lee, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but just give you a flavor of it. It was many and many a year ago in the kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. It's this gorgeous sort of like love poem, he's fallen in love with this woman. It's all great, but then it turns, unsurprisingly, and it says, the angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. So she dies. But listen to this. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul. I can't read it without crying. I'm sorry. How embarrassing. But our love it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. There's more to it, but I just think that's a gorgeous poem. I got a tiny bit emotional reading that because it's just, I don't know, there's something about the idea of losing someone and then bringing them back. So there you go. Edgar Allan Poe then, therefore, obviously he explores some very deep and interesting ideas that aren't just horror. Can I be honest with you, though? I prefer H.P. Lovecraft. I know that might sound a bit terrible, but some people get shamed. I've seen them shamed in forums and stuff because they might say they struggle to read Edgar Allan Poe and find that sometimes he's a bit boring or difficult to, not very accessible because of the older language. I think it's a shame that we, pick on people like that and say that because I do know what they mean. Some of the stories in here are a bit of a slog to understand and read because it's so verbose. There's so much like older language and so much detail in some of this that it's sometimes not as easy to sort of get into the stories. Many of them you can, don't get me wrong, but some of them are a bit more challenging than others. But I find that H.P. Lovecraft is just that little bit more modern in his writing style, and therefore I find him a little bit easier to connect with. But also I just love the world of H.P. Lovecraft, of ancient monsters coming back and the vibe. And Edgar Allan Poe is way better at dialogue, by the way, than H.P. Lovecraft's terrible at dialogue, but Poe is great at that. And anyway, this is a great book to pick up if you want to check out the works of Edgar Allan Poe and the poems as well. Next up we have, hang on, this is a bit heavy because I've got a few related to this to show you. This is the Annotated Frankenstein, the new Annotated Frankenstein, obviously by Mary Shelley, but the annotations are by Leslie S Klinger. What a great book this is. Frankenstein is a fantastic book if you've not read it. Again, this isn't an easy book to get into at the beginning. You may find yourself, your mind wandering because it takes a little while to get going in terms of the sort of the emotional heart of the story, but Frankenstein's a really wonderful book, and again, also a really moving book. There's just some really great moments in the book that about this, the monster in Frankenstein, the actual, most people will know this, I guess, but maybe you don't. You see this kind of mute Boris Karloff figure on the front, but that's not what Frankenstein's like in the book. He's philosophizing, he's talking, he's discussing, and he's also super angry that he's been created by this Dr. Frankenstein and yet neglected as a monster. And he's like, it's just, for anyone who has experienced rejection, or has experienced what it's like to be pushed aside. I actually talk about that in a podcast about Frankenstein. Then I just think it's a great book. And spooky and gothic too. The annotated edition is superb. Klinger just he does loads and loads of different interesting points that he makes. There's maps. There's whenever someone refers to a work of art, he'll in the text he'll include that work of art so you can check out what they were looking at. Also, there were different versions of Frankenstein released. Mary Shelley did kind of updated versions, and so there's helpful, if you're interested in this sort of thing, there's helpful ways of comparing the different versions and how they differ from one another. So I just think it's a beautiful book to read, beautiful book to own, and it's just a great one to dive into if you want details on it, or just to sit and read the whole book in one go, which is how I did it. And there's loads of other, introductions and extensive listings of films and the theatrical adaptations. It's got the author's original introduction to the 1831 edition as well as this essay by Percy Shelley. An essay which was about Frankenstein. Over 200 illustrations, original artwork, nearly 1,000 notes in there. Really good stuff. Leslie Klinger, by the way, I really recommend not only his work here, but this amazing tome. Ooh, H.P. Lovecraft. I've already talked about this in a video, so I won't go into depth, but just because it's Klinger, I'm putting it back in there. He does an amazing job of putting together, I mean, look at how thick this is, the great work of Lovecraft with just, again, more than 1,000 notes, 300 illustrations, extensive listings of books and films and stuff related to Lovecraft. This, I found this is a really, really great way of reading H.P. Lovecraft. And the other one to mention is the new Annotated Dracula, obviously by Bram Stoker, but this one again is annotated by Leslie Klinger, which is he does a great job. But as I've mentioned in one of the videos, he does decide to kind of talk as if it's just like a fun thing he does, a little device, talk as if the characters in the book are real, and describes them as if they're in reality. And some readers, including me at some points, found that a little bit confusing. But other than that, there's still lots of great information in that. Okay, moving on. What have we got?